Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. As you may know, this podcast is about lessons learned from one's relationship with their mother, good, bad, or indifferent. Are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mother? This episode will stand out as an example of how powerful and moving a positive relationship with one's mother can be, and that realization or knowing can hit you in any stage of your life. An internal, emotional, or physical intuitive awakening can happen to any one of us at any time in our life, even in the middle of a pandemic. The important thing is to listen to your mind and body and acknowledge this major shift and do something about it. Fear of transitions in work and life can be paralyzing. None of us, including myself, can afford to let fear get in our way. My guest's advice for those up-and-coming women in the business world is to use your full potential beyond a means to an end. Do not allow yourself to be defined by a role. Margarita Arriagada is a warrior and innovator, as well as the former chief merchant of Sephora. She's worked for decades in the beauty industry in merchandising and brand development. Today, she is the CEO and founder of Valde Beauty, where she created a luxury lipstick brand which is named after her mother. Her single mother immigrated from Peru to the U.S. with her young daughters and is the inspiration behind Margarita's new line of lipstick. Margarita Arriagada, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you, Jackie. I am so honored and humbled and excited to know you, to speak with you. And I just have to tell you, your podcast feels like it was made exclusively for me.
It was. But the best part is that we found each other, right?
Exactly.
And that's friends spreading the word is a big part of the magic of this show. My worldwide listeners have unique stories to share, stories we can learn from, and that's where my interest and passion comes from. Journaling these relationships, it could save us a lot of anxiety and time by learning from each other. It's amazing.
Exactly.
So how about we begin with your mom's name?
My mother's name is Carolina Valde.
And your new line, your lipstick line, was inspired by your mom.
Correct. The name of the brand is Valde. This brand is inspired by my mother. And when naming the brand, came to take place, I thought about naming it either Carolina or Valde. Valde is, I am originally from Peru, South America, born and raised with the rest of my family. And my mother comes from a great lineage. Her uncle, Abraham Valde, is a famous writer, poet, and I wanted to pay homage. So I thought about Valde, but it was long. And so I was going through the Latin dictionary. Before I got to Valde, I got to Valde, and Valde is a Latin word for very in English. And for me, my brand, even though inspired by my mother, is the ethos of my brand is so much what you talk about, right? Really stepping into who we are and being all that we were meant to be. This is what I wanted to celebrate through my brand. And so it felt very apropos to call it Valde because the meaning of that is very, and it's a word that places emphasis on the word that follows, which for me, the tagline is very you.
It's amazing the significance, the importance, and the research that you did to come up with all of this in homage of your mom, all a part of it to really make sure that it was right.
Absolutely. For me, the creation of this brand, first I will say it should be obvious that it came from a place of heart, because it's inspired by my mother. It's a celebration of her and through her, celebration of women. it feels like it was these divine connection moments in the journey of the creation that these things would happen, right? Because you're a beauty founder, I'm in the beauty industry, you're thinking about names, and you think about very popular commercial names, all of which have been taken. And so it was uncanny or serendipitous that I landed in this name, and it is that I felt that emotion immediately when it just lit up. That name lit up in the Latin dictionary. That I thought, oh, maybe my mother's sending me a sign. The whole journey of the creation of my brand has been like that.
Yeah, isn't it magical how that connection happens? Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. You are one of 3 children?
That's correct.
Your mom came as a single mom to the U.S.
Yes, my mom sort of fled, is the truth, from the relationship with my father. And so she fled with my older brother and my younger sister. She pretended that she was going to visit and her sister in Mexico, which we did, vacation in Mexico, in Acapulco. And one fine day after a summer in Acapulco, we hopped on a bus and crossed the border. She did not want to leave a trace of where she was going to.
Did you have any idea what this plan was? Or you just felt you were going along?
We thought we were vacationing, and one day after Acapulco, she said, "Oh, we're going to go and and see places." And we hopped on a bus. I had no idea of where we were going, and it was a treacherous trip, and it was probably my initial first, I think, impact of the beginning of the journey. That as I reflect on my mother, and I reflect on, as I create this brand, and I channel and I think about all who she was, she's planned. She went with her savings, she went with her jewelry, and we were going to cross the border in El Paso, Texas. And she's never worked a day in her life. She left a life of comfort, having housekeepers and cooks, and in search of wanting liberation. And so we were about to cross the border, and the bus was held up. And all the passengers were robbed of everything: suitcases, jewelry, money, everything. So we landed at a Greyhound depot in El Paso, Texas, with not a penny to her name. And I vividly remember, I was 12 years old, and I vividly remember my mother asking for money. And there are those things that have impacted my life, and how I saw the hardship of what my mother went through, and yet how she overcame in the most gracious way, with excitement, possibility, faith, optimism, generosity, love, that really profoundly impacted me. So this brand is an homage to her, and to, thereby, the potential that we all have as women. I mean, that's what I learned along the way. I saw her do things that I thought I would never be capable of doing, and for a long part of my life, I thought that I overcompensated and working hard so that I would never go through what my mother went through. But I think I carried a lot of baggage, I guess. I don't know how to say it in any other way. And not embracing the vulnerabilities that of the challenges that we all undoubtedly are always going to experience. So I lived most of my life, while successful in a career, but I lived in fear most of my life. And my mother was fearless. And so for me, part of my journey into becoming who I am is really by helping to understand how my mother was who she was, and taking that learning to help me overcome all the things that I have been able to overcome by now.
I just get the chills, especially this topic so timely of
That's why
what's going
your
on.
podcast
I'm
for
telling
me.
you, this show has had so many spiritual connections and serendipitous happenings. It is brilliant, let alone what's going on at the borders and the refugees and overpopulating cities.
Correct.
And I can see your mother with the children on the corner, and it's compassion that will help us solve this problem. Obviously, there's a lot more involved, but we certainly have to be compassionate. Can you tell us a little bit about what your mom's upbringing was like, what her family life was?
Yes, my mother comes from a European background, born and raised in Peru, from a lineage that was very artistic. I had mentioned her uncle, her father's brother, is an important poet in our country and writer, and her cousins were artists, very artistic, bohemian kind of in an artistic way. What was profound for me in my reflection in my upbringing is that she married an aristocrat, and they fell in love, and my father came from a opposite side of a family of who my grandfather was ambassador from Spain to Peru, and so here were these opposites that attracted each other. And what I witnessed was that my father's side of the family never really fully accepted my mother. I felt my mother was stifled. I don't think that she felt that she could be who she wanted to be, which I think is the reason my father fell in love with her. But she was, she was a vivacious. I've named a shade after her, which is called the Booleans, because she was so ebullient, and I felt that in that time, in that era. I was born in 1953, so it was a post-war. There's just this. I experienced this gaiety and beautiful time of my parents being young, but also there was such machismo and such strictness, and and a division of classes. And I kind of felt, it was never said, but I kind of felt like my father, was criticized for not marrying out of class, all these things that, have come to head, these days. And I think that's partially part of the reason. My father also had an extramarital affair, and and those things were kind of sort of accepted in our culture.
Oh, sure.
And he didn't have
Absolutely.
one kid, he had several kids. And so I always think about what my mother must have felt. She pretended to forgive my father, and sort of went on with things. Otherwise, he never would have accepted my mother, flying to Mexico with 3 kids, right? He had to sign the passports to release that. And so my mother to scheme this, her flight, and what must have come, what she must have felt, and thinking, this is it. I can't take this anymore, or stepping into her worth and thinking, I rather give everything up than to continue in this relationship where I am not valued. All these things that she must have thought, to take the risk of
Sure. I'd
life.
rather be on the street with no money
Exactly.
and hungry, but have my children than live in this
Yes.
life. I'm just summing it up based on because I'm getting frustrated by the restraint. But often people fall in love, right? Opposites attract. They say or the reason you fall in love with somebody is because it's something that you think is intriguing and exciting. And I'm not saying it's limited to this in your family's
Right.
instance in this story, but those are often reasons that you wind up, you can't stand the person either.
Absolutely.
But did Did anyone in her family know that she was planning this?
Her sister in Mexico. I don't know if my aunt knew ahead in advance. She certainly knew once we got there because she helped us get visas to come into the United States. So we didn't come in without papers. We came with visas, all legitimate. So I have to assume that my aunts, her sisters, knew. And then we have she had another sister in San Francisco. We landed in LA, but I have to assume that my aunts knew.
I have the chills, the courage and the strength.
The courage.
And the love for her kids.
The irony is you would have expected my mother to have had resentment, right? She suffered a lot. She went through a lot. I mean, I remember the robbers. We were sitting on the bus before we crossed the border, and so I remember the robbers. And I thought, it flashed through my mind. And I didn't know they were going to shoot them, and so that created such, first seeing the challenges in my parents' marriage. And seeing, my father's mistress, these little things that just impacted my upbringing. It's how I started this journey of being very introverted and just afraid of everything. I was afraid of my own shadow. But my mother, I never ever heard her speak bad about my father. She never ever articulated that she had left him. She just said, we're in LA, we're going to visit Disneyland, your father's going to come. And, I just talked to him. She never said anything bad about him. She never showed resentment. I never saw her cry, even though I know she had her dark moments. She was just happy. She made us happy. We never experienced really the hardship of what we were living. We didn't have money to eat, or a place to stay. And I saw my mother knock on doors to, look for work. And she started cleaning houses, mowing the lawn with my brother. But she never complained. She was always happy. She would say, are we happy? We're in the land of Disneyland. And tomorrow we're going to live in our apartment. We're going to decorate. And she would just fill us with these dreams and possibilities. And isn't this place beautiful? And, let's go out. And we would walk and she would tire us out so that we wouldn't be hungry. And I never heard her say anything bad about my father, which is just, to this day, I think someday I'll get there. Because it just seems incredible. But she was incredible.
And she gave up her family. Her family was still in Peru.
Yes.
She walked away from everything.
Right, from everything.
Wow. Other than the words that come to me, strength, and she was spiritual, I would assume.
She had a lot of faith. When we arrived in Mexico City, the first thing she had us do is go to the Zócalo, and she had us get down on our knees. She was a huge believer. We have a patron saint in Peru and in Mexico, the Virgen de Guadalupe. In Peru is el Señor de los Milagros. And she made us kneel, which I guess is, a ritual that a lot of devout people do. She had us kneel, my brother, my sister, and walk the Zócalo to the church on our knees. By the time we got to the door, we were all bleeding, and she was devout. She was devout, and I think that she had a promise, and to the Virgen de Guadalupe. So yes, I think her faith is what drove her, and it was her devout faith, her enormous faith that got her through everything that she.
Her prayers were answered.
Totally.
In Spanish, is this the Blessed Virgin of Guadalupe?
Yes, correct.
Very powerful. So you're in LA. You found a place to live. You're, I assume, into school. She did all this. She waved her magic wand.
She worked 3 jobs. She was cleaning houses. She eventually landed in a job in a factory that made record covers. And it was time of union, and she was working the graveyard shift and allow her make decent money. And she moved us into, remember when she moved us into a furnished apartment across from a park in East LA. And we thought we had died and gone to heaven. We just thought it was just the most beautiful, beautiful thing. And so, in seeing her work, she held 3 jobs. So she would work the graveyard shift in this factory, and she would clean houses and cook, and she worked all the time, and yet she was happy. It became my purpose to having seen her sacrifice so much, that my ambition in life was to work, make enough money so that she would never have to work. And there started my journey. She was the one that signed me up in school. I was one of the first alumni students at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. She never spoke English, by the way. She spent her entire life here and she never learned English. But in the Spanish radio station, there was this commercial on the school that guaranteed you job placement. Thing. So she went, okay, that's it. She didn't care if I was interested or not. She just signed me up, and she helped me with the application. And I remember when she said to me, okay, you're on your own now.
How old were you?
So I was 17. And so she signed me up at this institute. I had wanted to be an architect. And she said, no, that's going to take too long. This is 2 years. They guarantee you a job. You're on your own. Go do this. And it was the Fashion Institute. Before it was a Fashion Institute, it was a business school that transformed, evolved into the Fashion Institute, which, I started to take some interior design courses, etc., while I was working in the department store. And it was at the department store doing different jobs, on the selling floor, that one of my managers said, you really have talent for this. You should be really changing your major to merchandising, because you can enter the executive training program, and the rest was history. That's how my career in merchandising started, and off I went. And where I was able to say to my mom, I don't know, maybe in her 50s, early 50s, okay, no more. I don't want you to work anymore. And so I began to be able to afford, paying her rent. And, she would still do little jobs, and because she would stay, she wanted to stay active, but she began to live life and, and travel and spend time with her friends.
And never learned English.
No, she didn't have the need to. She had her Spanglish, which was very cute. And I think she understood more than she let us on to know. Such a great personality.
Describe her physically. Was she petite?
She was petite, 5 feet tall. My father, on the other hand, was probably 6 feet tall. So we're all tall. My siblings were all very, very tall. And here was this petite woman, obviously a force, and just vivacious, just the life. So she was magnetic that way. She was someone that if, I'm the one that took care of the money, and, she would say to me, okay, I have this money, go, hide it. And so then she would occasionally say, okay, how much money do I have? Well, we have $20. She would say, okay, give me all the $20. And I would be afraid. Here comes the fear. We're like, why? What are you going to do with the money? We only have $20. And she would go, I'm going to the supermarket and we're going to cook. We're going to invite some people, but we're not going to have money for tomorrow. What are we going to do tomorrow? And she would say, God will provide.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And she would cook, and she would invite people over. And there at night, I would be praying, like, God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So I grew up in fear. Well, she was fearless. She was total opposite of me. I was more like my father, and, very strict and intense and a worrier. And she was just like, no, today, we live for today. We live for the moment. Let's have a party. And she had music on. She had instruments all over the place. She would sing. Yeah.
Now I'd like to fast forward to your career. Even though you find yourself fearful, you pushed through and conquered and accomplished quite a bit. So let's please talk about Valde Beauty and the significance of this lipstick that projected confidence in your mom. You said she loved
Yes,
lipstick.
so I had a very successful career by other people's interpretations. I had great leadership roles. I worked in different industries. I landed a dream job at Sephora unexpectedly as a head of color cosmetics, and eventually became head of merchandising and chief merchant. And so, I mean, I had the dream roles, right? And in her 80s, she developed dementia, and so I thank God I had those roles because the care for my mom became increasingly expensive. I had 3 kids to put through college, and so even though I lived that dream role, I was super self-aware of the blessing that I had of being able to afford my mother's care. So she suffered from dementia, and she passed away at the end of 2014. By that time, Sephora was in a trajectory of steady she goes. It was a much bigger business. I was in this inflection point of feeling like I still had a lot of energy and influence that I wanted to impart on Sephora, and felt stifled. I felt that I could no longer impact and influence as much as I had been able to before. And my mother had just passed away. And so I kind of felt like I was at a point of which I could think about myself, feel less financially burdened. I feel like I was stifled. And in a very spontaneous moment when I heard my mother's voice in a meeting that I was in, I resigned. And I walked away. I think had I thought about it too much, I probably wouldn't have. I heard her in Spanish saying, "This is the moment." And it was in a moment of which I was like not happy. And there was an enormous void. I had my family, which of course were really supportive, but I felt lost. Like, is this all there is? And yet I knew that there was a lot of energy. And so I had this profound moment of turning back to God and surrendering and saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and you're it. You're it.
You're all I got.
And so I'm letting go, and I'm letting you, and it'll be what it'll be. And I just sort of woke up the next day feeling happy and feeling hopeful and seeing, light, and no longer worrying about, I wonder what I'm going to do tomorrow, and being grateful, coming into a state of gratitude. And it just so happened that at that time, my mother's birthday was in January. And so I think this was 2016. So I had gone through this, dark moment in 2015, 2016. I'm going through all her old pictures, and I had this reflection. There was, she always wore lipstick, and, and I remembered how important lipstick was for her. And, she always wore it defiantly. And I had this flashback of her, the end of her life when she had dementia. Of course, I always have lipstick on her. I always made sure she looked beautiful, that all her caretakers had lipstick. My brothers had lipstick. And every time I took out that lipstick to apply to her, mind you, she didn't recognize me, but she would see that lipstick and she would perk up, her eyelashes would flutter, and she would she would pucker up, ready for application. It made her happy. And it made her happy. So I just thought to myself, how is it possible that she did not remember me, but she never forgot how lipstick made her feel? And I was talking to a friend, I don't know, some months later, when she was commenting on my lipstick shade, because I'm a lipstick wearer like my mom. And I shared this story, and that friend said, oh, well, then you must create a lipstick brand for your mom. Very
yes,
and
yes,
I said,
yes.
oh, no, I can't do that. There my fear kicked in. Oh, no.
Yes,
Like,
you can.
there's so many lipstick brands and they're like all this. She said, no, but this is from you. There's that story that you have to tell on the significance of, lipstick and your mother and, and your journey. And that's how Valde Beauty came about, and through it, I've now come full circle. I now have understood the strength and courage that we all have, and I've now overcome. The fear is no longer what drives me. It is my passion that's significantly bigger than my fear, and I am thriving, and I feel that I'm on my way to be ebullient, like she is.
Wow, and as they say, the rest is history. Margarita Arriagada and Valde Beauty, thank you so much for being so open and honest and sharing your story with us on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Gratitude to you as well. I'm honored to have given the opportunity to share my story. Thank you so much.